Have a blessed day, and this is your teacher Joy. Welcome to our Techno class. Now you will learn the sampling techniques. And what are the sampling techniques all about? Let us find out. Okay, so at the end of the lesson, you will be able to identify the different sampling techniques, apply the sampling techniques, probability and non-probability by setting examples, and last, reflect the use of sampling techniques to real-life scenarios. For the keywords today, a sample is a subset of individuals from a larger population. Sampling is about selecting the group that you will actually collect data from your research. For example, if you are researching the opinions of students in your university, you could survey a sample of 100 students. Samples are used to make inferences about population. Samples are easier to gather because they are practical, cost-effective, convenient, and manageable. Statistics is a branch of science that deals with the collection of data, tabulation, graphing, analysis, interpretation, conclusion, and recommendation as what a research or study dictates. Thus, truths or facts are obtained from the scientific evidence in the conduct of investigation through a research or experiment. But what's the use of sampling technique in a research or study? Let's dig in and find out. In conducting experiments, there are two types of statistics, descriptive and inferential. Descriptive is concerned with quantitative data and the methods for describing them. For example, describe how do people observe social distancing. Write at least 5 observations among 6 people visiting the school Camp Vicente Lim. Steps: write down your observations, observing the social distancing protocol and meet the minimum health standards, wearing face masks and shields when exposed to public or even in private places. Okay, second, do the next processes. Tabulate the data, analyze, interpret, then you write the conclusion for the fact finding. At the end, the results may probably reveal that the number of people follow a social distancing but not wearing face masks, observing a social distancing but not wearing face shields, meet the minimum standards of wearing face masks and face shields but not the social distancing, and more. And next, we have the inferential, or what we call the analytical statistics. Okay, so this makes inferences about populations or entire group of people or firms by analyzing data gathered from samples or smaller subsets of the entire group, and deals with the methods that enable a conclusion to be drawn from these data. An inference is an assumption, supposition, deduction, or possibility. Inferential statistics starts with a hypothesis, a statement or conjecture about the relationship between two or more variables that you intend to study, and investigates whether the data are consistent with that hypothesis. Okay, so for the sample inference questions, we have what will happen if people don't observe social distancing. Second, why people don't able to follow the health minimum standards. And third, how do people get infected by the COVID virus? When you conduct a research about a group of people, it's rarely possible to collect a data from every person in that group. Instead, you select a sample. The sample is the group of individuals who will actually participate in the research. To draw valid conclusions from your results, you have to carefully decide how you will select a sample that will represent the group as a whole. There are two types of sampling methods. So we have the probability and non-probability technique. Okay, but first I have to discuss the probability sampling. This involves two random selection, allowing you to make strong statistical inferences about the whole group. For example, the study is to be restricted to the group of mathematics department. The random selection is needed to choose 10 samples from the group. Okay, so under the probability, we have the simple random sampling technique. Okay, so every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. Your sampling frame should include the whole population. Okay, so in this example, in mathematics department, so there are 24 teachers, but I need to choose only 10 respondents. Okay, to be able to show the selection, so you have to watch this.
Okay, so this is what you call a roll-out. So this is a non-biased selection of respondents under your study. All you have to do is to write each name in any sheet of paper of the total number of population, and then put them all together inside of a jar or any organizer like this. Then pick your desired number of samples as respondents in your study.
Next, let's move to systematic sampling. It is similar to simple random sampling, but it is usually slightly easier to conduct. Every member of the population is listed with a number, but instead of randomly generating numbers, individuals are chosen at regular intervals. Okay, so example, the National Achievement Test or NAT is to be administered by the Department of Education in the Division of Calamba City, and there will be 40 grade 10 participants needed as respondents in Camp Vicente Lim Integrated School. So from the total of 600 students out of 15 sections, every 15th student in the list written in alphabetical order is to be selected as a sample. Okay, so we have 15th, 30th, 45th, 60th, and so on until we collect 40 students. Okay, for the computation, we have 600 all over 40, which is equal to 15th. Okay, so let us hear Ma'am Katibot to give us another actual sample of systematic sampling technique. Okay, so you must watch.
Suppose that the total population is 42 students and you need 14 respondents. Divide 42 by 14 and that is 3. So this will be the interval of your sampling. The third student will be your first respondent and count an interval of 3 to choose for the other respondents.
Third, stratified sampling technique. This involves dividing the population into subpopulations that may differ in important ways. It allows you to draw more precise conclusions by ensuring that every subgroup is properly represented in the sample. To use this sampling method, you divide the population into subgroups, or what you call the strata, based on the relevant characteristics. Okay, so example given: gender, age range, income bracket, job role, and more. Okay, based on the overall proportions of the population, you calculate how many people should be sampled from each subgroup. Then you use simple random or systematic sampling to select a sample from each subgroup. Okay, so let us hear Ma'am Jessa Maratas to illustrate the sampling technique, okay, in selecting samples for respondents for the study.
Suppose that the total population is 40 students and you need 10 respondents as your sample size. In this kind of sampling method, you have to divide the population into subgroups based on their relevant characteristics. For example, I will divide this group of students based on their gender. So I will place all female in here and all male in here. So I stratified them based on their gender. Each group is what we call the strata. After that, you can use either simple random sampling or systematic sampling. By this time, I will be using simple random sampling. All I want is to get 5 respondents among female strata and another 5 respondents among male strata, so I can reach my sample size of 10. To perform random sampling, I have to number them 1 to 20 for the female strata and then another 1 to 20 for the male strata. So now, we will be performing a random sampling. For instance, the number that first came up is 3, then 20, then 12, the next one is 14, and then 6. So now I have my 5 respondents from female strata. And then for the male strata, the numbers that comes up is 14, then 2, then 8, and then 8 again. So you have to excuse it. The number 16 comes up. So I include him, and then the last one is 1.
For the last but not the least probability sampling technique, we have the cluster sampling. Okay, so this involves dividing the population into subgroups, but each subgroup should have similar characteristics to the whole sample. Instead of sampling individuals from each subgroup, you randomly select entire subgroups. If it is practically possible, you might include every individual from each sampled cluster. If the clusters themselves are large, you can also sample individuals from within each cluster using one of the techniques as what I have mentioned earlier. This method is good for dealing with large and dispersed populations, but there is more risk of error in the sample as there could be substantial differences between clusters. It's difficult to guarantee that the sampled clusters are really representative of the whole population. To further give us another example on how the cluster sampling is processed, here is Mrs. Raquel de Villa.
The first one is define your target population. So all sampling technique should identify the population. Second one, divide your sample into clusters. Again, cluster created must have a similar distribution of characteristics as the distribution of the population as a whole. The third one, randomly select cluster as your sample. And lastly, collect data from your chosen sample. Campi Santillim Integrated School is one of the biggest public schools in the division of Calamba City. The population in this school is expected to be large. Let us consider the teachers' population as our cluster sampling example. Let us try to group them according to cluster or grade level, given that each grade level has teachers for different learning areas and a special teacher on it. Let's say for grade 7, we have Math, English, Science, TLE, Filipino, AP or the Araling Panlipunan, ESP, and MAPE teachers. Same follows for grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12 teachers. So to determine our sample, we're going to use the simple random sampling. Let's say I'm going to pick cluster 7 or the grade 7 teachers, cluster 11 or the grade 11 teachers, and cluster 9 or the grade 9 teachers as our sample.
However, for another sampling methods, we have non-probability sampling techniques. These involve to non-random selection based on convenience and other criteria allowing you to easily collect the data. In a non-probability sample, individuals are selected based on non-random criteria and not every individual has a chance of being included or selected in the study. This type of sample is easier and cheaper to access, but it has a higher risk of sampling bias. That means the inferences you can make about the population are weaker than with the probability samples, and your conclusions may be more limited. If you use a non-probability sample, you should still aim to make it as a representative of the population as possible. Non-probability sampling techniques are often used in exploratory and qualitative research. In these types of research, the aim is not to test a hypothesis about a broad population, but to develop an initial understanding of a small or under-researched population. Okay? Under the non-probability sampling, we have convenience sampling. A convenience sample simply includes the individuals who happen to be most accessible to the researcher. This is an easy and expensive way to gather initial data, but there is no way to tell if the sample is representative of the population, so it can produce generalizable results. For example, you are researching for the programs or interventions that will suit to the online learners. Since the students mainly connected to their children, Then you solicit opinions from them dealing with the topic of the study. This is a convenient and easy way to gather data because the parents and students are at reach, but the outcome in the study does not represent the whole cluster. Second, voluntary response sampling. This is similar to a convenient sample. A voluntary response sample is mainly based on ease of access. Instead of the researcher choosing participants and directly contacting them, people volunteer themselves. Example given by responding to a public online survey. Voluntary response samples are always at least somewhat biased, as some people will inherently be more likely to volunteer than others. For example, you send out the survey to all students at your university or school, and a lot of students decide to complete it. This can certainly give you some insight into the topic, but the people who responded are more likely to be those who have strong opinions about the student support services. So you can't be sure that their opinions are representative of all students. For example, you want to know more about the opinions and experiences of bullied students at your school. So you purposely select a number of students with different support needs in order to gather a varied range of data on their experiences with student responses. For the last non-probability sampling technique, we have the snowball sampling. If the population is hard to access, snowball sampling can be used to recruit participants via other participants. Okay, so to deeply understand me, here is an example. You are researching experiences of homeless in your city, and since there is no list of all homeless people in the city, probably sampling is not possible. You meet one person who agrees to participate in the research, and she or he puts you in contact with other homeless people that she or he knows in the area. Okay, so I hope that you got them all and you understand the meaning of each sampling technique method, and you are already prepared with our next activity, okay, answering the learning task this day. For the learning task number 1, so let me measure your understanding about the things you have learned today on the probability and non-probability of sampling techniques, and how you will be able to apply those concepts in selecting or choosing your sample in your future study or research. Directions: identify the type of sampling technique applies in the given situation. Choose the correct letter, words that correspond or corresponds to each statement. A. Simple random sampling. B. Stratified sampling. C. Cluster sampling. D. Systematic sampling. E. Snowball sampling. F. Convenience sampling. G. Voluntary response sampling. And H. Purposive sampling. First question. It is a random sampling that uses interval of 5 in selecting samples from the population whose names are arranged in alphabetical order. Very good. The answer is systematic sampling. 2. It is a process of gathering information wherein a researcher looked for a representative since the data is not found at a researcher's data or area rather. The answer is snowball sampling. Very good. The researcher uses messenger or other online means in collecting the information. Nice. The answer is convenience sampling. Okay, number 4, it applies a random selection of samples through the process of draw lots. Okay, very good. Simple random sampling. 5, it divides the population into subgroups by gender, age, and height for her or his study. Excellent, because the answer is stratified sampling. Okay, number 6. The researcher selects student respondents in grade 10 whose parents are working abroad. Good job. The answer is purposive sampling. Okay, number 7. It randomly chooses 3 groups of samples out of 22 sections with the same number of students. The answer is cluster. Okay, so that's nice. Okay, let's move to last 3 questions. Number 8, the data collected comes from a group of volunteer teachers answering the online survey. Very good. The answer is voluntary response sampling. Okay. 9, all selected samples are generated from electronic device in random. Okay, so that's nice. Simple random sampling technique. Okay, for the last question, the data is obtained from the smokers students in grade 12. Okay, so you are really brilliant because you got the answer correctly. So the answer is purposive sampling technique. Okay, so I hope that you got a perfect score in this round and be prepared with the next learning tasks. Okay? Learning task number 2, identifying sampling methods. In each of the following situations, identify and describe the sampling method being used. 1. A sample of 2,000 was sought to estimate the average achievement in mathematics of 10th graders in a city's public schools. The average 10th grade enrollment in the city's secondary schools is 100 students. Thus, 20 schools were randomly selected, and within each of those schools, all 5th graders were tested. 2. A researcher is interested in maximum security inmates. She groups inmates by the type of crime committed, determines the percentage of the total in each crime category, and uses that percentage to determine the number of inmates randomly selected from each group. 3. A researcher has a population of 100 7th grade children from a local school district from which a sample of 25 children is to be selected. Each child's name is put on a list, and each child is assigned a number from 1 to 100. Then the numbers 1 to 100 are written on separate pieces of paper and shuffled. Finally, the researcher picks 25 slips of paper, and the numbers on the paper determine the 25 participants. 4. Instructors teaching research methods are interested in knowing what study techniques their students are utilizing. Rather than assessing all students, the researchers randomly select 10 students from each of the sections to comprise their sample. Last, a sociologist conducts an opinion survey in a major city. Part of the research plan calls for describing and comparing the opinions of 4 different ethnic groups in the Philippines: Aita, Mangyan, Igorot, and Visayans. For a total sample of 300, the researcher selects 75 participants from each of the 4 predetermined subgroups. For the third learning task, describe how you would select people to take your survey in the following situations with the listed method. 1. Say you wanted to survey professors at PUP Santo Tomas about their publication records. You want to be sure to include professors from each department, even the very small ones. 2. You want to select a sample from grade 10 students using simple random sampling. How would you do this? 3. Say you were interested in sampling students who deal drugs on campus. What sampling technique could you use to build this sample? Okay. For the last learning task, choose your desired sampling technique in collecting the data. Second, prepare a topic in collecting 10 data. 3. Discuss the process of collecting the data after applying the chosen sampling technique. For the reflection, so you have to write things that you have learned today together with your insights, and then you also write your difficulties, unforgettable experiences while having these activities. Okay? For the substantial information this day, so here are the references. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching and listening in this Techno class. And if you have any questions or clarifications about the topic today, do not hesitate to call me or message me in any of my accounts, okay? But don't forget to send in all your answers or outputs this day, okay? Bye-bye, and once again, this is your teacher Joy, your 24/7 public servant. God bless.